So we're only a few months into this year, but it's already been a challenging one. 2 devastating earthquakes have hit two parts of the region. Tell us about how the bank has played a role in the response both in Haiti and in Chile, and can you compare and contrast these 2 different experiences for relief and reconstruction?
Let me first say that one of the more interesting things, if you were an actuarian looking at natural disasters in Latin America, you would find that there's a curve that's picking up over the last 5 years. And natural disasters are happening or have been really hitting countries mainly and fundamentally through hurricanes that affect the Caribbean, Northern South America, and Central America. You have floods that have affected just about many countries in the hemisphere, and more recently, earthquakes. It's of course a very different kind of outcome in both Haiti and the case of Chile. In Haiti, in 28 seconds, in January 12th, you lost almost 250,000 people. Today, over 320,000 people are handicapped, largely because they were, either major hit by a door or whatever, that people were handicapped and lost part of their limbs, or that those are the kinds of difficult situations those injured people have today. And the cost of repairing this damage in the country, according to the damage needs assessment, is about 120% of that country's GDP. Now you look at Chile. In Chile, the earthquake in Chile lasted about 125 seconds. It killed less than 300 people. And it did have a huge impact on that country's productive capacity, because it hit an area in the country which you have a lot of the wine production, a lot of the pulp and paper production, and a lot of the cities along the coast. But despite all of that, the repair in that country will probably be about 15% of GDP. Now, where are the main differences? Of course, the power that was released in the earthquake in Chile was probably 400 times more than the power that was released in the case of Haiti. The difference, of course, were things like building codes, the areas where the city had excessive building and it was easy to see kind of the damages, and more importantly, the quality of the construction. I happened to be in the inauguration of the new president of Chile, where they had an earthquake that, for Chileans wasn't much. For me, was a lot. It was 5 points in the Richter scale. And actually, I was sitting next to Jim Jones, that as a true Marine, he was unflappable. And I saw President Uribe running to the door, who is this tough guy, right? But in any event, that gives you a sense. But and nothing happened. Everybody was looking around the windows and everything else. But that tells you really about the quality of construction that is there and how the country has been prepared for it.
Got it. Jim was in that chair a little earlier today. So.
Yeah.
In March, you had your annual meeting of the IDB Board of Governors, and at that time you said that no challenge is more important, that remains is more unfinished than the challenge of addressing poverty in the region. What are the steps that the IDB, and perhaps even with the support of the United States, can we take at this point in time to address poverty in the region?
Well, certainly this is the reason that these institutions were created. The IDB was created over 50 years ago. And its basic mandate, of course, is to fight all poverty-related issues. We all know that there's no one solution to poverty problems, but certainly institutions like these ones, when you sit back and you look over the last 15 months and you say, what happened in the world? Well, certainly you could say that the West lost in terms of its economic capacity. We're going to be through a process that will probably still take 2 years before you get back to the pre-crisis levels, or maybe as long as 3. But the emerging markets flourished. You look at Latin America and you find a region that basically were the last to be, some countries, not all, were the last to be impacted by the crisis and some of the first to be going out of the crisis. And that's a very positive development, and I'm reminded that in over a period of 25 years, Latin America had 25 years had 30 financial crises, so almost more than once a year. And none of them cost less than 10% of GDP. So Latin American technocrats have seen this movie before. And they saw this movie and they realized that it takes countries to really get back up a long time. But it also provided for very good quality regulators. And I say all of this because in the face of that, what made a huge difference were development institutions like the IDB, like the World Bank, like the IMF, that provided a wall in a way to stop the contagion. And if you were to look at Greece today, there's a lot of lessons of what could have been done preemptively and we would not be in the situation we're in. Having said all that, of course, the challenges in Latin America still remain extremely big. You still have over 150 million people that are earning less than $2 a day. They're typically more and more living in cities with all of the big city problems that you have, and in a situation where clearly there are tremendous needs that governments need to deal with and not enough resources to deal with them. And that's basically the role of what we can continuously do, and that means that working with institutions matters significantly. You can talk all about development, but if there's no quality of institutionality, you won't go the extra mile. And that's an area that we devote a lot of time.
In that same talk, you identified the challenge of early childhood education. 46 million children still not having access to quality education in the region. What can be done to address this need for improving access to education?
I'm glad you raised that, because the way we think at education, and this is the big issue for Latin America for the future, and one which we are very much involved, and one which we have basically begun to look at it basically with 3 pillars. One is early childhood development, I'll turn to that in a minute. The other one is the whole work that needs to be done with teachers, regardless if they're unionized or not, but is critical to work with teachers. And then the whole part of skills to work. And here is one part of kind of the way you look at this continuum in a very important way. Early childhood development there's some really interesting things that have happened. President Bachelet did a great work in this regard in Chile and was able to really have a real impact. If you look at kind of development impact, meaning the bang for the dollar, if I might, there is no one more effective than in early childhood development. Why? Because typically a child that doesn't develop, as you know it as an educator, sufficient cognitive skills in the first 18 months of his life, if he's not adequately fed with the kinds of vitamins and the kinds of food that he needs at the beginning of his life, there will be a ceiling as to how much he can learn. So if we're working for future generations, early childhood development becomes a critical component. And it's a component that more and more governments are looking to see how they can invest. And I truly believe that is something that in a question of a decade, if done right, we can really have an impact in the region.